my car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes.
She was sitting in a room full of people celebrating her greatest performance, and she was the only one not smiling. Everyone around her was laughing, rewinding. Watching that scene play back on the screen like it was pure gold, producers were proud, the network was thrilled. Critics were already calling it one of the most unforgettable moments in television history, but she sat there completely still, pale, eyes fixed somewhere no one else could see. Because she knew something no one else in that room knew, she knew what really happened on that set, what was said when the cameras weren't rolling. What she was made to carry silently, invisibly, through every single take, with a smile locked on her face and tears held so tight behind her eyes that she thought they might never come out. That episode aired in 1977. Millions watched it. It became iconic. It became the thing people talked about when they talked about her career. But for her, it became something she could never bring herself to look at again. Not once, not in 40 years, and for a long time she never told a single soul why. People assumed it was modesty. Maybe she just didn't like watching herself on screen. Stars do that sometimes, right? They're their own harshest critics, but the truth was something far darker than that. Because behind that single episode, behind those studio lights, those perfectly timed laughs, and that flawless performance was a story of pressure, pain, and a secret buried so deep it nearly destroyed her. And this is that story. Once you hear it, you will never look at that episode the same way again. Her name was in every American household before she even turned 30. She had the kind of talent that stopped people mid-sentence just to watch her. Effortless, magnetic. Like the camera wasn't capturing a performance at all. Like it was simply following her real life, and the rest of the world was just lucky enough to witness it. She grew up in a small town where extraordinary things rarely happen to ordinary people. But she was never ordinary. Teachers noticed it early. Neighbors talked about it quietly. Even strangers would pause and say, "There is something about that girl." By the time she was a teenager, she had already performed in local theater, competed regionally, and written dozens of letters, handwritten, carefully sealed, to studios and agents across Hollywood. Most never replied, a few sent polite rejections, one sent nothing at all, but she kept going. Because when you carry that kind of fire inside you, silence doesn't stop you. It only makes you push harder. She arrived in Los Angeles at 21 with less than $300 and one name scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. Within 2 years, she had a recurring role on a network drama. Within 4, she was the lead. America adored her. She was warm in interviews, generous with fans, never difficult, never demanding. Always grateful, and that image, that perfect, gracious, all-American image, was exactly what the studio needed. So they protected it, polished it, packaged it. And in doing exactly that, they quietly began to build a cage around the woman who was making them millions. She didn't see it happening at first. The career was moving too fast. New offers, new sets. New cities, there was always somewhere to be and someone waiting for her to arrive. But slowly, without her even realizing it, the control tightened. And by 1977, she was so deep inside the machine that the woman she saw in the mirror barely felt like her own reflection anymore. The show that made her a legend had been running for 3 seasons by then. Every week, tens of millions of Americans tuned in. Fan mail arrived in truckloads. Her face was on magazine covers, on lunchboxes, on posters pinned to bedroom walls across the country. By every measure the world could see, she was living the dream. But what happened behind those cameras was something the public never saw. 16-hour days were not the exception, they were the schedule. Weekends were a rumor. The pressure to perform, to be completely, endlessly on, was relentless in a way that is almost impossible to describe. She started losing sleep. Then she started losing weight. Her co-stars noticed but said nothing. Her team noticed but said nothing. The studio noticed too, and what they said was, "We are behind schedule, get back on set," and she did, every single time. Because that was the unspoken rule for a woman in her position in 1977. You showed up, you smiled, you delivered, and you did not, under any circumstances, complain. But something else was happening on that set, something no one was naming out loud. There was a man in that production, senior, powerful. The kind of man whose name attached to a project could open any door in Hollywood, and he had taken a very specific kind of interest in her. At first, she told herself it was professional respect. He praised her instincts. He championed her talent. He told anyone who would listen that she was the finest actress he had ever worked with. But what happened next had changed everything. It started the way these things always start, small enough to explain away. A comment that lingered a little too long. A hand placed on her shoulder that never quite moved when it should have. An invitation to a private meeting that had absolutely nothing to do with the script. She brushed it off. She told herself she was reading the situation wrong. And that was a skill women of her era had been quietly trained to master, misreading their own discomfort, giving the benefit of the doubt, staying grateful, staying quiet. But the behavior didn't stop. It escalated. And by the time production reached the episode that would go on to define her career, she was already emotionally hollowed out, already isolated, already afraid in a way she could not fully name. That's when things took a turn no one on the outside ever saw coming. The episode called for her to film a scene of raw emotional vulnerability. The kind of scene that demands complete trust, a safe environment, a crew that respects where the line is, a director who knows that a real performance comes from a protected space. Instead, she got the opposite. What was demanded of her during the filming of that scene, the way her limits were ignored. The way she was made to feel disposable in the very moment she was most exposed, left a mark that no award, no applause, no standing ovation could ever erase. She filmed the scene anyway, gave everything she had, left the entire crew speechless, and then she walked quietly off set and sat alone in her dressing room for 2 hours. Nobody came to check on her. That night she told one person what had happened, one friend, and she made her swear never to repeat it because the fear of not being believed was suffocating. The fear of being called difficult was paralyzing. The thought that one word of complaint could undo everything she had sacrificed her entire life to build was more than she could risk. So she buried it, went back to set the next morning, script in hand, smile in place, and said nothing. When that episode aired, the response was unlike anything the network had ever seen. Critics reached for words like transcendent. Viewers flooded the phone lines. Journalists were declaring it the most emotionally honest performance on American television in years. And she sat in her apartment that night watching the phone ring and did not pick it up because she knew exactly what that performance had cost her. The award nominations came, then the interviews. Then the retrospectives. Every entertainment journalist in the country wanted to talk about that scene, that moment, that woman. She smiled through every single one. She became an expert at giving the same answer 100 different ways, gracious, humble, slightly deflecting, and never once letting the truth anywhere near the surface. But the weight of it was growing. 2 years after that episode, she quietly walked away from the show. The studio called it a creative transition. Fans were devastated. The press speculated endlessly. Nobody guessed the real reason. Nobody even came close. She pulled back from public life, took smaller roles, moved differently through the industry. People assumed she was recharging, taking time for herself, doing what successful stars sometimes do, but the truth was nothing like that. She later described this period as the darkest stretch of her entire life. Anxiety that wouldn't lift, depression that made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain. A deep and terrifying sense that the person who walked into that studio in 1977 had never fully walked back out. She tried therapy, stopped, started again. Built walls around herself, then tried to tear them down, then built them even higher. And through all of it, the one thing she could never bring herself to do was watch that episode. Decades passed. The world outside her window changed. The industry changed. And slowly, painfully, the culture of enforced silence that had trapped so many women for so long began to crack open. Names started surfacing. Stories started spilling out. Powerful men who had operated without consequence for decades suddenly found their names in headlines, their reputations unraveling in real time. She watched all of it from a distance, holding her own story like a stone pressed against her chest. Then one afternoon, a journalist she trusted, someone who had covered her career with genuine care and respect, reached out, not for a scandal piece, not for an exposé, just a conversation. An honest one she agreed to meet. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, something shifted inside her. She started talking, carefully at first. Then with a clarity and a steadiness that surprised even herself. Like something locked for 40 years had finally found the right key. She told the truth, not everything, not in full detail. Not publicly, not yet, but enough to begin releasing the weight of it, enough to let herself breathe in a way she hadn't in a very long time. But here's where the story took another turn that no one expected. When word of her account quietly began to circulate, the reaction was not what she had hoped for. Some people believed her without hesitation, But others, people who had sat in the same rooms, worked on the same sets, benefited from the same machine, pushed back hard, called it exaggerated. Called it old news, called it convenient timing. She sat with that betrayal in silence, and then she realized something with absolute clarity. The fight wasn't over, it was only now beginning. She never sat for a full public interview about what happened on that set in 1977, not on camera, not in detail, but she did eventually write it down. A memoir arrived quietly with no promotional tour, no press circuit, no carefully choreographed media rollout. Just words, on pages, for whoever needed to find them. The book sold out in 3 days. She has said in the years since that she has found something close to peace. Not closure, she's clear about that distinction. Some things don't close. They simply become part of you, woven into who you are, no longer a wound but still a scar. As for that episode, the one the world still celebrates, the one she has refused to watch for more than 40 years, she still hasn't seen it. And she has said quietly and without hesitation she never will, not because she is ashamed of the performance, but because some rooms, once you finally manage to leave them, you never go back into. Not even in memory. So what do you think? Was she right to protect her silence for so long, or did the system around her fail her in ways that can never truly be made right? This story isn't just about one woman, it's about an entire era, an entire industry. And the countless people who paid an invisible price for it, in silence, in pain, and in performances the world applauded while the truth stayed locked away. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely want to hear from you. And if stories like this matter to you, real stories told with honesty and without flinching, make sure you subscribe, because there are more coming. Stories Hollywood tried to keep buried, stories that deserve to finally be heard. Don't miss what comes next.